Hey everyone, Matt Thomas here. Thanks for watching. So the two most common questions I get as an instructional coach is one, can you watch my class for a few minutes while I run to the restroom? And two, how do I teach reading? I may be making that first question up, but let's get to the reading one. I get that a lot. Like, how can I teach reading? How do I get my students to read? Please give me some strategies. And so I wanted to do a really quick video about this, and I want to address this. So first of all, if you've seen my videos before, shout out to my Paloma family, you know that I haven't filmed a new one in quite some time. The ones that I'm sending you were ones that I filmed last year. Very important, addressing all aspects of education. And I've been sending those out lately. But I haven't been filming new ones because I'm currently in the middle of a much bigger research project, essentially. So I'm focusing on the science of reading. And this is a big, big ordeal. It's not something I'm going to finish next week or next month, or I'll be honest, it might not even be next year, because I'm really focusing and digging into the actual science of what it takes to be a successful reader. And I will tell you, if educators knew, like really knew, all that's involved with developing successful reading, I think we'd reevaluate how we assess our students. I really do. And I'm putting this all together. It's taking me a while. So if you're wondering like, hey, Matt, thanks for sending these videos, but one side, a few of you have already seen these. Where's your new stuff? That's why. But I want to get into, quickly address like what we can do, with how to teach reading. And I'm going to say this, with this giant undertaking I'm going through right now as far as the science and reading, because I want to make this video less than 10 minutes, I'm just going to give you the preliminary research. Like here's what I know. And I'm not going to do all the neuroscience citing, etc. That's for the much bigger thing. But this is one of those like, here's what I know. Let me put this down for you quickly. I'll do the much bigger thing later on. But so let's quickly address what reading is and what it's not. So reading is not natural. Reading is something that our brain, we're not born with the natural ability to read. There's no part of our brain that specializes in reading. And I want to make sure that's very, very clear. Because reading is arguably one of the most difficult things we can ask our brains to take on. It is so powerful, though, because it strengthens so many parts of our brain. But I want to make sure we understand it's not natural. So we're asking our students, ourselves, people to try to master something that's completely unnatural to us. The second thing, as much as we'd like to think it is as educators, reading is not a finish line task, meaning once you get to this level of reading, then you've done it, right? Once you get to a 1200 score or 1400 or 1000, then you're good. Like, nice job. It's not at all. Reading is very fluid, and successful reading can look different from one person to the next. So I want to make sure that is very, very clear. The next thing, Lexile scores are a bit arbitrary. And I say a bit, they really are arbitrary. They are set up in a certain scale. However, it's not something that's natural. It was something that was created by someone. Our brain does not have a reading level scale. So when we look at like, hey, at ninth grade, you need to be reading at this level. That number is kind of a created number, a made up number. It's part of a scale. I want to make sure it's clear, but it's not natural. Our brain doesn't have it. We're kind of putting that in place. Like, hey, you need to get to an 1150 or 1200. That doesn't mean anything to our brain. So the scores are arbitrary. So please don't get too hyper focused on Lexile scores. Lexile scores have an important place. We can use them for growth. If someone scores, say, an 880, and now they're at a 950 or 1,000 or a 1,200, it's like, cool, you showed growth. It's not an end number, so I would definitely not suggest basing grades on a person's Lexile score. Like, hey, you scored lower than this person, you can't earn a grade as high as the other person, because they are arbitrary and they're very fluid. I want to make sure that's clear, focusing more on growth. I'm going to use the Harry Potter example. Harry Potter is an 880, so it's a 6th to 8th grade reading level, though I'm sure many of us would love if our students were fully engaged with Harry Potter, because you could have a lot of rigorous activities with that. So please keep that in mind. The next thing, reading is very, very powerful for the brain. It really, really is, because it highlights so many different parts of the brain and is so challenging that it's incredible. So our goal to have our students be the best readers they can be is an amazing goal. However, we have to understand that that's going to look differently to individuals. So the next thing, and I know I'm taking a while to set this up before I get into like, Matt, just show me how to teach reading. But I want to make sure all of this is understood, because that will allow us as educators to kind of really adapt how we teach reading and to understand just how truly difficult it is for our students, and to not get too frustrated at times, right? If we get to have an understanding. Next thing, okay, so here's the challenge for us as high school teachers, and I'm sure most of us watching this are high school and middle school as well. By the time students are in high school, and to be fair, starting late middle school, most of the building blocks and the obstacles have already been established. So reading is something that you'll see in my much longer video, which again is not next week, not next month, it might not even be next year. What truly has to happen from birth to create a successful reader. It's amazing. And so by the time we get the students, they have already, like the actual true development of reading starts at birth, so starts in the womb. So it's very challenging for us as high school, middle school students, because the building blocks should have already been established. Not by the elementary school teachers. They're amazing. They're doing everything that they can, but even before that. So we're getting the students when things have already been established, including the building blocks of reading and the obstacles. Right? So that's our challenge. And just like a spoiler alert, as far as where does reading really begin, it begins through language, the development of language and conversation. And so some people will say, like, how do I get my students to read more? If I say, hey, talk to your students more. First, have some conversations, have some in-depth conversations, start to create that rigor in our conversations so it can be applied to reading. That's like taken back a little bit, like, wait, no, I thought you were talking about like reading. I'm like, yeah, start talking to your students more, which I know you all are. But okay, that being said, like, thanks, Matt, for sharing that. How do we get our students to read? Okay, here we go. And again, this is the short, simplified version. Again, it's there'll be a much bigger reading video when everything gets done. So how can I help my students become better readers? Please understand, I didn't say how can I get them to score a certain number on Lexile. Reading is not a finish line. How can I help them become better readers? First of all, by the time we get students, most of you watching this are high school teachers, late middle school teachers, same thing. We should focus on motivation. That's the key, because their obstacles, the building blocks have already been established. So our biggest get is to motivate them. We need them to buy into what they are reading. Have a connection to what they're reading. That's the two biggest things. A, motivate them, and have them buy into what they're reading. So how do we do that? So the first step, purpose, right? That purpose should have some connection to the students' lives. What they're reading should not be arbitrary. Hey guys, let's read this random arbitrary story that you have no connection with. And we might think they have connection, like, hey, in the textbook, right? They put in the textbook, the students are going to love this. We know our students. Right? So sometimes oopsie, I just moved the computer. Sometimes we as the teachers need to go, hey, my students are not going to like this story. I need to find them something they're going to enjoy. And that may look different for different classes, right? So we need to motivate the students, have them buy into what they're doing, right? The next thing, so they need that purpose. The next thing, they need to read something that they enjoy. That kind of ties into the first thing. But they need to read something that they enjoy, or they're not going to do it. Number 3, the reading needs to be short enough that they don't lose interest. Now, for some of you are like, what? No, like my students read novels. I'm not talking about those readers. We have to understand that most of us watching this video, we read a lot. We had to read a lot to get here. Like, we have those skills. I'm not talking about the novel readers, the ones that are already motivated to read. I'm talking about the general, most of our students, many of our students, etc. So the readings need to be short enough that they don't lose interest, because if we don't get them interested, then all those benefits aren't going to be there. And finally, what they are reading shouldn't be the end task. It needs to be the build-up to something else. I'll explain that in my example. So it's not like, hey, we're going to just read this story today just because. And it shouldn't be, hey, we're going to read this story and I'm going to give you a test on it. Like, that's not, no, it needs to be the build-up to something else, right? They need to be able to apply it. So let's show you how that looks like. Now, okay, so what does this look like? Now, I'm an English teacher, and so just keep that in mind, right? So I can show you how it looks like in an English class. So when I'm teaching satire, first of all, purpose, right? So elements of satire. I'm not going to bore you with all those elements, but English teachers would know that. Audience, purpose, commentary, and society, literary sarcasm, etc. And so I tie that in, of course, to Family Guy, TikTok, YouTube, a lot of satire out there, and show them the difference between satire and sarcasm, right? So they're seeing kind of the purpose of this. It needs to be enjoyable. So we read 3 different types of satire over 2 days, not in one day. Like, that's a lot, right? So short and enjoyable pieces of satire. And what that short and enjoyable could mean different things to your different classes, right? Something that you, not only that we enjoy reading, but something you know your students are going to enjoy as well. I think I have a couple satires, teenage satires that apply to teenagers, and then satire about the Nintendo Wii and how people who buy it think that they're going to actually, stay in shape because of this little plastic thing that we put on the floor, that kind of stuff. So it's really, really funny satires, and teenagers enjoy it. Number 3, as we read the satire, I read as they follow along. So some classes you could say, read this to yourself, and then we'll come and discuss it. Others you can't. You know your audience better. But if you read to them, that's naturally how people learn to read, right? When they're kids, when they're little, when they're toddlers, our parents are reading, parents are reading to them. They can identify the words. They can learn the correct pronunciation. They can learn vocab and context. And I say this respectfully, even if some students start zoning out, they can still be involved because they're listening to you reading, right? So read to them as they follow along. Number 4, so as I mentioned before, like, the reading should be part of a bigger picture. The reading shouldn't be the end result or the thing. So when we would read satires, their end result in my classes, they would end up writing their own piece of satire. And we had already looked at satires and modeled it and all this stuff and had fun with it. So they're excited. They're like excited to write their own piece of satire. And I give them great examples from students who have written them in the past. And we don't spend more than a week on satire. Quite honestly, we spend 3 days on satire, and then they may take a day or 2 to write theirs. And that follows along with the arc of learning. And if you're like, what the heck is the arc of learning? I'm going to show you a video. I'll do a video of it in the next week or so, because I think it's very powerful, what actually successful learning looks like. Anyway, so to simplify this, if you're like, great, Matt, thanks. Can you simplify it even more? Motivation. Number 1 determining factor of success, I've said this in other videos, enjoyment with achievement. Students are more apt to continue reading if they know that they will enjoy the reading. What about our ELs? Please keep in mind, ELD students are teenagers first. All of this applies, right? Of course, we have, there'd be adjustments in vocab, adjustments in what you're reading, different styles, levels, etc. But they're teenagers first, so it has to be the same thing. And I have to tell you an anecdotal story, and I know anecdotal stories are not examples of strong research, but I have to tell you this. When I was a second-year teacher, I think, I was teaching ELD for the first time, and there's this idea, which can be very accurate, like there has to be a cultural connection to what they're reading. And I was like, yeah, cultural connection. So I got this very, very popular Mexican author, and we studied this in our credential program, and I'm like, my students are going to love this, because most of the students at the time, if not all, were Hispanic. And so I'm like, I'm going to bring this text, and we started reading it, and it was so boring, and my students were dying. And I asked them, I'm like, wow, I thought, this is supposed to be a great book, and adults love it, whatever. And the students were like, I'm bored to death. And I learned a very valuable lesson. Like, yes, cultural connection to reading has to be there. It's amazing. Make it fun. Just because someone connects to the culture of the author doesn't mean they're going to be engaged. So it still has to be fun. Still applies to ELs. Anyway, that's hopefully the somewhat short video about reading. Thanks, guys, for watching.